All right, buckle up, everyone. We're diving deep into Cambodia's criminal code procedure today.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's fascinating stuff, really. A blend of tradition and modern influences.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack how they handle criminal cases over there.
From the very beginning, the initial report of a crime.
Yeah, all the way through to appeals.
And even beyond.
So we're talking investigations, trials, the whole 9 yards.
We'll see how this unique legal system really ticks.
What I find really interesting is how it's not just a static set of rules.
It's constantly evolving.
Right, through judicial interpretation.
Each judgment adds another layer,
Now it's like
shapes how the code is applied going forward.
each case kind of refines the bigger picture of Cambodian law.
Exactly. It's a dynamic system, always adapting.
I like that.
And within this system,
Yeah.
we have a cast of characters, each with their own roles.
Lay it on me.
Let's start with the judicial police.
Okay, the judicial police.
They're the front line, the investigators.
They kick things off when a crime's reported.
Right, they have the power to search, summon people for questioning,
Oh, wow.
even detain suspects if they need to.
So they have a lot of authority right from the start.
They do, and that's why their actions are balanced by the oversight of prosecutors.
Prosecutors, okay.
They're the ones who decide if there's enough evidence for formal charges.
So they're like the gatekeepers.
Yeah, making sure investigations are done right and only solid cases move forward.
Checks and balances.
Exactly. Then we have the investigating judges.
Okay, investigating judges, what do they do?
They're like specialized investigators for the complex cases.
Ah, I see.
They can do in-depth investigations, issue warrants, really get into the nitty-gritty.
Sounds intense.
It can be, but it ensures a thorough examination.
So all these roles kind of work together to make sure investigations are thorough, but also fair.
That's the idea, yeah.
And I guess alongside all this, there's the possibility of civil action too, right?
Oh, absolutely. So while the state is pursuing criminal charges,
Yeah.
individuals harmed by the crime can also seek compensation.
So two separate but connected processes,
One criminal, one civil.
adding another layer of complexity.
For sure. But it ensures a more holistic approach to justice.
Okay, so let's walk through a typical case then.
All right, it all starts with the reporting of a crime.
Someone witnesses something, they're a victim, they report it.
That's the usual way, but get this. Public officials are actually obligated to report felonies and misdemeanors.
Oh, wow, really? So they have to report it even if the victim doesn't?
It's a legal requirement.
Huh, interesting.
It really emphasizes bringing crimes to light.
Makes sense.
So that initial report triggers what we call the preliminary inquiry.
Okay, the preliminary inquiry.
This is where the judicial police start gathering information, interviewing witnesses.
Like the first stage of a detective's investigation.
Exactly. Piecing together the story.
I can imagine.
Now, depending on the complexity of the crime,
Yeah.
a judicial investigation might be launched.
Ah, so that's when the investigating judge steps in.
Exactly, with their more extensive powers.
And things get more serious for the suspect.
Potentially, yes.
So if the investigating judge finds enough evidence,
Then the case moves to trial.
the trial.
The court examines all the evidence.
For both sides.
Prosecution and defense, the accused, the civil party, if there is one, their lawyers.
Everyone gets their say.
Everyone gets to present their arguments, and the court carefully considers it all.
It's like the final showdown.
In a way, yeah.
So the trial ultimately leads to the judgment.
Right. The court delivers the verdict, determines the sentence, and how it'll be enforced.
So we've seen how a case goes from report to investigation to trial.
The basic framework, yeah.
But I'm sure there are some unique things about the Cambodian system that make it stand out.
Oh, absolutely. There are some fascinating specifics that set it apart.
I'm all ears. Let's dive into those details.
One of the most unique aspects is the concept of imprisonment in lieu of payment.
Imprisonment in lieu of payment. What's that?
Imagine this. Someone could choose to serve prison time instead of paying fines.
Whoa, really? Instead of paying?
Fines, proceeding taxes, even compensation to the victim.
Wow, that's different.
It's rooted in the social and economic realities of Cambodia.
Definitely not something you see every day.
It's a unique approach, raises interesting questions about justice and practicality.
Yeah, especially for those who can't afford to pay.
Exactly. A lot to unpack there.
For sure.
Another unique aspect is the extradition process.
Extradition. So bringing someone back to Cambodia to face charges?
Right. If they're in another country,
Sounds complicated.
it can be navigating international laws and all.
And who handles that?
The Phnom Penh Court of Appeal plays a key role.
So a specific court for extradition cases.
Yes, they determine if it's justified.
A lot of international cooperation involved there.
Definitely.
Now, what about rehabilitation? Is there a focus on that in the Cambodian system?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, tell me more.
So under certain conditions, someone convicted of a crime can have their sentence removed from their record.
Oh, so a chance for a clean slate.
It's about acknowledging that people can change,
I like that.
not being forever defined by their past mistakes.
Second chances.
Exactly. And finally, there's the concept of criminal records themselves.
Criminal records. So what information do they keep track of?
It's pretty comprehensive. Convictions, acquittals, arrests, even dropped charges.
Wow, so it's a detailed history.
It is, but there are strict rules about who can access them and why.
So it's not just public information.
No, there are safeguards to protect privacy and prevent unfair use.
Makes sense.
It's all about balance, transparency, and individual rights.
Something they put a lot of thought into this.
They have. A lot of care went into outlining these procedures and ensuring fairness.
It's impressive how much ground they cover in their criminal code procedure.
And we've only scratched the surface.
I'm ready to dig deeper. Where do we go from here?
Let's move on to what happens when someone wants to challenge a judgment, the world of appeals.
Ooh, appeals. That's where things get really interesting.
It sure is.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so appeals.
This is where someone might think, hey, wait a minute, that judgment wasn't right.
Exactly. They have the right to challenge it.
Okay, but it's not just as simple as saying you disagree, right?
No, there are specific grounds for appeal.
So like what kinds of things?
Well, it could be arguing the law was applied incorrectly, or maybe evidence was mishandled, or there was bias in the proceedings.
So you need a solid reason.
You need to show that something significantly affected the outcome.
Makes sense. So how does the process actually work?
So first, you have to file a formal appeal.
Within a certain time limit, I'm guessing.
You got it, and then the Court of Appeal takes over.
The court of appeal. Okay.
They review the case, but they're mainly focused on the legal and procedural aspects.
So not necessarily retrying the whole thing.
Not exactly. They're looking at whether the lower court did everything by the book.
Apply the law correctly, follow the right procedures.
That's what they scrutinize.
So they're like quality control for the legal process.
You could say that, and if they find errors, they can overturn the judgment.
Oh, wow. So they have that power.
They do, or they can send it back to lower court for a retrial.
A do-over.
Exactly. So it's a thorough system of review.
Ensures things are done properly.
And then there's the Supreme Court,
The big leagues.
the highest court in the land. Their role is to make sure the law is interpreted consistently.
Across the whole country.
Right. They handle cases through what's called cassation.
Cassation. That sounds
It's
serious.
It's a very specific type of legal review.
So what happens during cassation?
They're not looking at evidence or retrying the case.
Okay.
Their sole focus is whether the lower courts interpreted the law correctly.
Like if there are any inconsistencies in how they applied the law.
They're the guardians of legal consistency.
So everyone's on the same page.
Exactly, and in rare cases, there's a motion for review.
A motion for review. What's that?
That's like a last-ditch effort to challenge a final judgment.
So multiple layers of checks and balances.
It ensures judgments are fair, errors are addressed.
You mentioned something earlier about another unique aspect of appeals.
Oh yes, the concept of opposition to a judgment.
Opposition. What's that about?
It allows someone, even if they weren't in the original trial, to challenge a judgment.
If it affects them.
Exactly. Say someone is declared a debtor in a judgment, but they weren't even there at the trial.
They weren't even involved.
They can use opposition to present their side and potentially change that judgment.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It gives a voice to those who might be affected by a judgment even if they weren't part of the case.
That's a strong safeguard.
The Cambodian system really emphasizes fairness.
So it's not just about going to a higher court.
There's also this opposition avenue.
It adds another dimension to the whole process.
It really does, and it highlights how the system tries to be as fair as possible.
So appeals in Cambodia, it's a multi-layered system.
Designed to keep things consistent, address injustices,
And ultimately, ensure those judgments are equitable.
We've looked at how judgments can be challenged, but now let's look at what happens after the verdict.
The enforcement stage, this is where it all becomes real.
It's where the legal decisions translate into actions.
I'm ready to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen how judgments can be appealed in Cambodia, but now what? What happens after a verdict is final.
Now we get to the enforcement stage. This is where those legal decisions turn into real-world consequences.
Right, like the rubber meets the road, as they say.
Exactly. And enforcement, well, it can take different forms.
Depending on the judgment, right?
Right. Like if it's a conviction,
Right.
the Cambodian Criminal Code lays out a whole range of punishments.
Fines, imprisonment, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And the judgment will specify what the punishment is and for how long, and also the specifics of how it's carried out.
Like the details of how it'll all work.
Right. Things like parole are included in there, and even that imprisonment in lieu of payment we talked about.
Right, where someone can choose prison over paying.
A unique approach, for sure.
Really
Yeah.
makes you think,
It does, but enforcement goes beyond just punishment, too.
oh, how so?
Well, it also includes making sure any orders for restitution are followed through.
Restitution? So making things right for the victim?
Exactly, making sure they're compensated for any losses, stolen properties returned, things like that.
So it's about trying to restore balance after a crime.
That's the idea. And another important element is the whole management of detention.
Detention. So
Yeah.
like holding people during the legal process and after a trial.
Yeah, the Cambodian Criminal Code procedure has specific rules about how detainees should be treated.
To prevent things like illegal detention.
Exactly. It's all about protecting people's rights.
Are there ways to ensure that happens, that people's rights aren't violated in detention?
Oh, absolutely. There are several safeguards in place, like any judge or prosecutor who gets a complaint about illegal detention has to investigate it right away.
Wow. Immediately.
And detainees also have the right to be brought before a judge.
To make sure they're not being held unlawfully?
It's all about ensuring due process.
Those are important protections, for sure.
It really shows how much emphasis Cambodia places on individual rights.
Even within the criminal justice system.
Exactly.
So we've talked about punishments, restitution, detention.
The key aspects of enforcement.
But what about the criminal record? What goes into that?
The criminal record, it's a comprehensive document with all the details about someone's interactions with the criminal justice system.
Like their history with the law.
Exactly. It includes convictions, acquittals, arrests, even if charges were dropped.
So it's not just about convictions.
It's a complete picture.
And who can see these records?
That's where the rules come in. Access is restricted to certain entities and only for specific reasons outlined in the criminal code procedure.
So it's not just public knowledge.
No, not at all. There are safeguards to protect people's privacy.
To prevent unfair use.
Right. It's all about balance.
Makes sense.
And Cambodia also allows for some information to be removed from the record in certain situations.
Like under what circumstances?
Well, through things like rehabilitation programs or if a convention is overturned on appeal.
So there's room for change, for second chances.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey exploring the Cambodian Criminal Code procedure.
It's a complex system for sure.
We've learned so much, from how a crime is reported to how judgments are enforced.
And all the intricate steps in between.
It's amazing how much ground we covered.
We talked about judicial police, prosecutors, investigating judges.
The different stages of a criminal case, those unique aspects like imprisonment in lieu of payment,
The right to opposition, the whole appeals process.
and how Cambodia ensures fairness and protects individual rights.
It's a legal system with a lot to offer.
I hope our listeners are walking away with a new appreciation for the Cambodian legal system.
And maybe even inspired to learn more.
As always, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.